So I want to talk about some of the implications of committing our lives to God. What does that mean? How do we do that? What does it look like? First thing I want us to think about is committing to God is recognizing that God is the keeper of our lives. So a couple of months ago, a friend of mine from this congregation, who's probably worshiping with us today, asked me to watch their car while they went on vacation. And because I love this friend so much, and hello friend if you're watching, I said yes, and I also said yes because the car is a Tesla. We do so many things for God. Now, I'm not necessarily a Tesla person. Number one, the cost is prohibitive for me. Number two, I'm not a technological person, so a Tesla is basically an iPhone on wheels. And number three, Teslas are like the most highbrow cars, and as a pastor, I try to drive lowbrow cars. So I noticed when I first started to babysit the Tesla that when people said, hey, that's a nice car, I would say, well, thanks, but I'm just borrowing it and taking care of it for a friend. Now, that was about a month ago. About a month later, when people ask me about the Tesla, they say, wow, that's a nice car. I say, yeah, thanks a lot. I like it a lot. Now, what's the subtle difference between me saying I'm babysitting this car and saying, thanks, I like it a lot? The difference is it is a subtle shift in ownership understanding. Now, by the way, if you're watching and that is your Tesla, I know it is your Tesla. But I believe that we do this with our lives. See, when we are born, we basically understand that our lives don't belong to us, that our parents are in charge, our teachers are in charge, our pastors are in charge, our babysitters are in charge. But as we grow older, and perhaps this is the sin of the modern era, we begin to think again and again and again that our lives belong to us. We're in charge of our lives. Nobody else is in charge. Back away. We are in charge of our lives. So that's the first thing to think about. It's about recognizing that our lives belong to God. The second thing I want us to think about is actually committing our lives to God is a lot harder than planning our lives. It's a lot harder. It's way easier to plan every step of your life. Not better, but it's easier. So that's the second point. The third point I want to share with you is this. Often we feel that our own plans are way better than what God could do. We feel that what we do is better than what God could do. So when I have not been driving around in a Tesla this summer, I have been cooking. And I just have to say, I love cooking. It is probably my most happy therapeutic moment of any day, just to dive into a recipe and just to try to make a good meal. So I got a recipe for a Chick-fil-A sandwich from a local newspaper. And I love Chick-fil-A sandwiches, and I thought, well, this will be fun. Now, the title of the article was A Simple Chick-fil-A Recipe. The title of the article should have been A Very Complicated and Expensive Chick-fil-A Recipe. So I began this, and it's like seriously the most complicated recipe I've ever made in my life. First, of course, you begin with chicken breasts, but they have to be bathed in a brine of salt, kosher salt, buttermilk, brown sugar, and rosemary, and ice on top of that for 24 hours. Then you have to take the chicken out, and then you have to roll the chicken in a seasoning that involves smoked paprika, of which none of these ingredients I had, onion powder, parsley salt, all kinds of obscure ingredients. I had to go to the store and buy like $100 worth of ingredients to make this Chick-fil-A sandwich. Then you have to roll it in a beautiful flour breading, which has a secret ingredient I can't tell you about. Then you put it in an egg bath, and then you roll it in saltine crackers, and then you have to cook the Chick-fil-A sandwich in only peanut oil. That's the only oil you can cook it in. So I made this sandwich, and I shared it with a friend, and I said, what do you think? And he took a bite, and he's like, pretty good. And he said, well, how much did it cost you? I said, well, it's about $120 to make that sandwich. And it took me like 3 days. He then asked me, why didn't you just drive down to the Chick-fil-A and buy a sandwich for $5? The reason is, of course, that I believed that my plan was better than anybody else's. I had to do it my way. The last thing I just want to share with you is this. Trust this, that God's plans are always good plans. God's plans are always good plans. A friend of mine asked me this last week, if God's plans are always good plans, why did 4 million people just die in a global pandemic? Why was there an apartment complex in Florida that killed nearly 200 people? Why has there been crime outbreaks with firearms in cities like Chicago and Los Angeles where people are dying by the hundreds? Why is there a mental health crisis in the entire world? Why is unemployment and family breakdowns and construction and all kinds of medical ailments, why are those things happening if God is in fact good? If God's plans are good? And what I said to my friend is, I don't know. But I do know this, that God's plans are good and that not every plan in this world is God's plan. But if we will commit our lives to God in the beginning, and graduates, I want you to hear this, if you commit your life to God in the beginning and you let God do the planning, your life will be more successful, you'll be happier, and you can take all of that pressure off your shoulders.